Now we come to a part of the event, ladies and gentlemen, which I think many of you have been particularly waiting for, where we've talked about business, and we've talked about politics, and we've talked about property. Yes, do come on in. The seat's somewhere near the back. Were you up all night? I still haven't found anybody who actually will admit to not having gone to bed. No, Mayor, please, stay seated. We come to the point where we now go to talk about politics in the most blunt form possible. And we are extremely pleased, honoured and privileged to have with us South Africa's the mayors from South Africa's two leading cities. I've got to be very careful here. And I'm going to invite first, by the way, I have had some questions. If you've got an anonymous question you wish, it is still richard@richardquest.com. You can email me, or richard.quest@cnn.com, and I will put your question to the mayors after. What is the plural of mayors? What's the collective noun? A politic of mayors. Anyway, how did we decide who was going first? Very simple. Who said yes first? It's simple as that. No political judgment in the decision to invite the Honourable Mayor of Cape Town, Patricia de Lille, to come and address us. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, goeiemiddag, molweni.
How is she going to speak for?
The Honourable Mayor of Johannesburg Parkstown, the immediate past President of SAPOA, Dr. Sidise Moseneke, and the current President of SAPOA, Mr. Etienne de Klerk. Also our facilitator, Mr. Richard Quest. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say I feel very honored to being invited here today. And I look forward to also welcome you in Cape Town. SAPOA is going to have the conference in Cape Town next year, and I look forward to welcome you there. The City of Cape Town is happy to use any opportunity we can to interact with the business community, including property investors, owners, and developers. This is because we have big plans for the City of Cape Town. We are working to make every effort to make and build a great city, to make a great city even greater. By building the city on 5 pillars: the opportunity city, the well-run city, the caring city, the inclusive city, and the safe city. We need to create the kind of city where people can find opportunity, where we can truly address the historical injustices of our past and make a better future for all our citizens. Now, the government cannot do it alone. To truly make a city that belongs to all Cape Townians, we need the private sector to be our partner. But it's not enough to ask people to partner with you. You have to show them that you mean business. What is more, that the partnership will be worth the while. So let's talk business. For a while now, we have been measuring ourselves in terms of efficiency and economic benchmarking in terms of international indicators, in addition to national comparisons. Cape Town knows that in order to create the kind of shared future that we want for all our residents, we have to accelerate economic growth within the city region. And so we are doing all that we can to encourage growth and activity. When you decide to invest in Cape Town, you will know that the finances of the municipality is in order. You know that we have the ability to manage resources we have to drive our ambitious economic agenda. And when we issue a bill for rates and tariffs, you can be sure that it's accurate and on time. And what is more, you can be sure that the money you pay will be immediately put to use. But don't just take my word for it. Ask a credit rating agency like Moody that has given Cape Town the highest credit rating in the country. The only thing keeping our credit rating down at the moment is the sovereign credit rating. But I can't do much about that. Well, not yet anyway. Indeed, we have such prudent financial management that in the coming financial year, we will be offering financial incentives for those investors who want to move into the Atlantis area in Cape Town. Our hard financial incentives include the proposed waiving of development facilitation fees in Atlantis, which is located about 30 kilometers from the city center in Cape Town. And we further propose the provision of time-use electricity at 2012-2013 tariffs subject to NERSA approval. In other words, there will be no increase in this financial year coming for the time of use tariffs in the Atlantis area. It will remain the same. This is in addition to our broad incentive package that we are taking to our council in July. Now that package focuses on urban management, area-specific marketing, faster zoning applications, and a general restructuring of how the city approaches people who want to do business with us. This is the part of our one-stop shop model that we are pioneering, also called the Investment Facilitation Unit. We are in the process of reorganizing our internal structure so that we can move from a red tape to red carpet approach in the city of Cape Town. In our new approach, the private sector won't have to worry about having to deal with 20 different people in the city, most of whom will take almost a year to reply to just one email. Instead, we will have one user interface that will hold the private sector's hand or the private investor's hand throughout all the numerous applications. And I will soon be appointing an investment facilitator in my office that will drive major applications through the administration on behalf of the mayor. Because one thing you can be sure of in Cape Town, we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. If you have a lot of money to put into the city, you don't have to go through a bureaucrat who may or may not help you depending on your place in the line. A frustration expressed by a SAPUA member in a viral email recently. In Cape Town, if you are investing a lot, you don't wait for a minor official to help you. You go straight to the top. This applies equally also to smaller investors. If you are a major investor, you can set up an appointment with the mayor's office and I will drive that help that you need. That's how serious we take business in the city of Cape Town. In our city, when you turn the switch, the lights come on, because we have a reliable electricity supply. And it's only unreliable when circumstances are beyond our control, such as the Eskom supply areas. The only blackouts in Cape Town is curtains. So of all South African cities, we have spent the highest proportion of our budget on capital spending over the past 6 years. An example of this is the fact that we budget above inflation, and I'm going to take the rep for this. We budget above inflation for our road maintenance so that we are not just repairing our road network, but we are also improving our road network. So therefore, very few potholes in Cape Town. We have invested in broadband and are already seeing major returns in the form of savings to government. For the next financial year, we are investing over 100 million rand in broadband rollout, and this will create further spare capacity that we will rent out to the private sector. At a more technical level, what we have done, we have collapsed 27 old and complicated zoning schemes into just one single one, with a simplified and consistent roles across the entire metro. So where you and your legal departments might have had to contend with 1,570 pages of regulations, we've trimmed that down to 185 pages. We have developed a new planning bylaw that will streamline local procedures and requirements. The only thing we are waiting for is for Parliament to finalize the Spatial Planning Land Use Management Bill before we will finalize our planning regime. We are completely overhauling our back office and internal development procedures that will enable e-submissions of planning and building plan applications by next year. The beta version will go live in July 2014, and I want to encourage you all to use it before we finalize the system. In addition to this, by next year, you will also be able to self-track the process of those applications on the web. On the other side of this interface, in the back office, we are concluding strict time frames for all relevant line departments in the city to comment on the applications. And to show you how serious we are taking fast turnaround times, we are linking the time frames to the performance measurements of line departments with internal and external auditing. We have a policy-driven land use management system in place and have now completely rationalized our decision-making environment. Indeed, instead of adding new policies to complication land use management, we have already repealed 265 obsolete policies to get them off our books. These are being replaced with a new single city spatial development framework and 8 district spatial plans. And as part of our commitment to evidence-based planning and decision-making, we have begun to track over 70 businesses areas across the city by systematically assessing their current performance and long-term growth potential. This work, which is truly groundbreaking, will harness a broad range of city open source data to identify local barriers to investment opportunities and growth. Not only will this up-to-date information help guide the city's interventions, as a demonstration of our support of the private sector, we will be sharing this information with businesses via a web-based platform that will also be launched early in the new year. Now, our beta version of the web platform that will go live in April 2014, and I want to encourage SAPOA members to participate in using the beta version so that we can refine this tool even further. And let me also say, of particular interest to the property sector, the City of Cape Town has a strategy of releasing underutilized land and municipal facilities at the lowest valuation rate to the buyers. For example, in Atlantis, the city makes available parcels of land at low prices on public tender every 6 months. We vary our release of these parcels based on the uptake every cycle so as to ensure that we do not flood the market. We follow this approach because we do not see inherent value in the city being an owner of land, property, or buildings if we are not deriving maximum use of them. Of interest to SAPOA members is the fact that we want to increase this program of sale through tenders on a much wider scale than Atlantis, and we have been developing a property register to facilitate this process. That property register is in an advanced stage of completion and will allow us to make more land available to the property sector in a way that is mutually beneficial to all parties and perfectly within the framework of the law. And finally, to demonstrate our commitment to efficiency and supporting our private partners, the city is in the process of concluding our economic growth strategy in conjunction with our social development strategy. At their heart, the two strategies have the understanding that economic development and social development are two sides of the same coin. You cannot speak of redressing previous imbalances in society, of giving people dignity and strengthening communities if people do not have opportunity. They are completely aligned to our integrated development plan, the National Development Plan that PIC spoke of yesterday, and the One Cape 2040 vision for the region. The two strategies are structured to complement one another and reorientate the city's thinking to provide a whole-of-organization approach to economic development and social development. It is to make the entire government realize that everything that we do has in some part to play in the broader economic or social policy. Now, in South Africa, and including in Johannesburg, we often hear about people trying to break down the silos. In Cape Town, we are doing it. And in breaking down those silos, we are reorientating the vast city bureaucracy to be focused on economic growth and the efficiencies that encourage growth. That means a better package of offering to the private sector. And it means a better approach to doing business with the private sector. In conclusion, there has always been this distinction between Johannesburg and Cape Town. Cape Town was where you went for a holiday break or a great place to relax with incredible scenery. But when you wanted to get down to business, there was nowhere else but Johannesburg. Those categories are old news because the game has changed now. In the 21st century, where cities are the drivers of global growth, the old rules don't apply. And if you are an investor or developer, and you are looking for the best place to spend your money, where you know that government is a reliable partner as you are, then Cape Town, unfortunately, is the only choice. Anecdotally, I happened to read details of the performance of the prime property in various cities between 2007 and 2012 by Knight Frank just before I was coming here. And in terms of that report, Cape Town was the only South African city to make it on the list with prime property valued at $6,000 per square meter. Johannesburg did not make it onto the Knight Frank list, but Wealth Insights estimate the prime property in Sandton to be worth over $2,500 per square meter. Now, while the property market is admittedly at a certain level, like we've heard over the past 2 days, if you are a major property investor, which South African city do you think your portfolio would perform best in? But let me also put my money where my mouth is. If you want a meeting with me to get things done, you can write to me at mayor.mayor@capetown.gov.za, or you can call my office on 021 400 1300, or you can call me on my cell number 083 303 8352. And then you can see for yourself just how seriously the City of Cape Town is taking its pledge to be efficient when dealing with partners, especially partners in the private sector. I must say I've learned such a lot over the past 2 days. Once again, it just shows me the way the private sector operates and the way we operate in government. And many days I hope and I pray that we'll be able to make government also work like a business and not like we have got all the time in the world. Because Mayor Parkstown and myself, we have just been elected for 5 years, and I want to finish my task in the next 3 years. So please join me on that journey as members of SAPAO. Thank you very much, and God bless.
I could be rather cruel and put the mayor's phone number to the test. But being the Honourable Mayor, we will take her at her word. But she did go at that phone number at a fair rate. How many of you wrote it down? Come on, how many of you would actually like her to repeat it again? When we come to the Q&A, listen, we're running a little behind time, but we're going to have the mayor from Johannesburg next. And then I think I'm going to steal 5 or 10 minutes of lunchtime to continue to put questions to the mayor. Do we agree with that? Good, because you weren't really getting much choice on that. Right, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome for the mayor, the Honourable Mayor of Johannesburg.
Do you have the PowerPoint?
Are you using... Don't touch the bell. That's your clicker, sir. All yours.
Thank you. It's set up. The risk, if it's not set up, is that I might get off the actual presentation. Are we there? Oh, thank you. Well, thank you, Facilitator, Mr. Richard Quest. Acknowledge, of course, the Honorable Executive Mayor of the City of Cape Town, my colleague, Mayor Lille. Also acknowledge, I think, the leadership of SAPOA. and the relationship was built with SAPOA over the past few years, and in particular, the interaction that we've had in the past year, both as the City of Johannesburg, but also in my capacity as chairperson of the South African Cities Network. We've built a very solid relationship with SAPOA in terms of engaging on the issues that are important to both the cities and to the property owners. I want to congratulate Mr. Estienne de Klerk for his appointment as incoming president. I'm confident, having worked with yourself and cities, I am quite confident that in fact the relationship would continue and that would be able to deal with the issues that affect your members and also enable us to present the issues that are important to our cities members in terms of the cities network, but also as the city of Joburg. I thought it might be important to state that in fact as we were preparing for this discussion, we reflected on what the important issues are in relation to the topic under discussion, and that related primarily to efficiencies. And we thought that it might be important to reflect on efficiencies, both in the context of the institutional efficiencies, but extend that to have a conversation around urban efficiencies and the issues that we need to deal with, and to then also have the discussion about, in fact, what we think the future should be responding to current challenges and reality, and how, in fact, we think we should be responding, both as government but also as the private sector. I thought it would be appropriate to start the presentation with an explanation of what the broad regime is in the city of Johannesburg, the planning regime. You would know that whenever we consider the integrated development plan of the city of Johannesburg, we include in the integrated development plan the spatial development framework, which indicates what our spatial and land use policies are, and what in fact the direction would be, and and the spatial framework goes into detail when we look at the 7 regions of Joburg and say, let's get it to a bit more detail in terms of the 7 regions of Joburg. And in certain precincts, and I'll indicate a bit later, we do go to the point of getting precinct plans in place so that there's clarity what in fact the land use policies and rights would be in terms of those specific precincts. And that pretty much is the sort of planning framework and planning policies that we have in the city of Johannesburg. But this relates directly to how, in fact, we do precinct plans. And this is in response to the Gautrain developments, where having identified the developments along the Gautrain routes, we then said, in fact, in the 2 critical stations that we thought developers would wish to develop at the back of the Gautrain developments, let's put in place the precinct plan so that we can create certainty for the market about where and how they can invest and what the opportunities are. And we've seen take up to these from the market in terms of people saying that we now have clarity of what the city would allow in these areas and how this interfaces with the decision-making process. And this decision-making process has been streamlined. So what we do is that we have delegated to planning tribunals or planning committees the ability to make decisions in line with the precinct plan, the regional spatial frameworks, and the spatial development framework. What that means is that for as long as council has approved the policy, you have at least certainty that if I apply, I will get my approval, and that the council would, if it is in line with the policy, approve. And if in fact it is not in line with the approved policy, it is only then that you would require that the matter be considered by mayoral committee. In the past 2 years, we've only received 1 application that is now going to mayoral committee, in fact served before the mayoral committee last week, and would be going on a site visit to consider that. What that means is that in fact you don't have a situation where there needs to be appeals because there's clarity on the policies that the city has developed to enable to enable you to get your decisions quite faster. But I also thought that we need to talk about what's probably become the infamous billing issues and the problems that we've had in the city of Johannesburg in relation to the implementation of SAP and the issues that we've had to deal with. And I want to talk about it from 2 points of view. There are the issues that we deal with in relation to when we went live with SAP, the problems that we encountered and dealing with those. And I think that for most developers, you would know the issues that we've had to deal with. And I can tell you interesting stories about the project process and everything that could go wrong went wrong in terms of implementing SAP, but that's not the point of my discussion. I thought it might be important to also reflect on the fact that whilst stabilizing SAP and while stabilizing billing processes, it was also evident that, in fact, some of the problems are also inherently located on the other side of the desk, where, in fact, we've had problems. We've had the infamous land sale that took place where somebody sold a piece of land from the municipality to some private property developer, and all of them actually knew that, in fact, that wasn't approved in terms of council processes. But we've also had situations where you have entire townships being developed without following due process in the city of Johannesburg. Now, what that means is that, in fact, if you do ask me for a clearance certificate in a township that was not approved, chances that I would be able to know your meter number are zero. Now, we've had the conversation with the attorneys, the Johannesburg Attorneys Association, about, in fact, the issues that we have to deal with the attorneys, but I think that we need to have a conversation with the developers and property owners with regards to townships that have been irregularly established. And I think it is a matter that does require attention from all parties. We've had the discussion with Neil about, well, how do we deal with this reality? Because it is a reality in the city of Johannesburg. And that means that whilst we keep an eye on the issuing of clearance certificates, we also have to keep an eye on ensuring that we regularize and or take action against townships that are irregularly, if not illegally, established. What we've also had to do is to say that as the city of Joburg, we would need to create certainty to those who have been developers in our city about, in fact, what the turnaround times would be. And in the next few weeks, we will be announcing a customer services charter that would indicate what the service standards would be and what the turnaround times would be in relation to developments in the city of Joburg. The other issue that I thought we should talk about relates to how we look at the basket of goods that we provide and the basket of services that we levy rates and municipal charges for. And our view has always been, as the city of Joburg, that we take a basket of goods approach. So when in fact you find that as a country we've experienced significant increases in relation to electricity, the rates increases have in fact been minimized to inflation levels so that we are able to mitigate where there are pressures on the electricity side. And the point is that we take a basket of goods approach. With regards to rates, we have received comments particularly with regards to commercial rates that say, please drop the commercial rates. I can indicate that in terms of the new rates policy that we're presenting for adoption to council next week, Thursday, that would be dropping the ratio of the business ratio from 3.5 to 3 against what the benchmark is, which is the domestic ratio. So we would be dropping that ratio from 3.5 to 3 by next week, at least in terms of the recommendations that we're making to council next week. But you would also know that, in fact, if you look at the overall contribution by business if you look at the tariff increase in the next financial year with regards to rates, that in fact the business rate is increasing by less than 4%, which is below inflation. We're also looking similarly at electricity and the average increase with regards to electricity, and the comparison there is really indicating what the rate is in terms of electricity. And we're conscious of the fact that if you do a comparative analysis with other municipalities, the electricity increases in the city of, or the electricity price has been quite comparatively expensive in the city of Joburg. And thus, in fact, the reduced increase in terms of the tariff that people would be contributing towards electricity from the next financial year, so that we're able to reduce the cost of doing business in the city of Johannesburg. And this slide is pretty much indicating where our investments would be going. I think it's important to state that we have, over the past 2 years, been working comprehensively on a 15-point financial plan that has enabled us to increase our capital investment in infrastructure in the city of Johannesburg. We can say that we're at the point now that, having intervened not in terms of tariffs, but primarily intervened in terms of gaining efficiency gains from the organization, tightening our belts as the city of Johannesburg, we can release money towards capital investments. And those capital investments would look at primarily ensuring that we're able to replenish aging infrastructure. Our capex budget is increasing from 3.9 billion in the current financial year to 7.6 billion in the next financial year, and to 11 billion in the subsequent year, and close to 12 billion in the year after. So over the next 3 years, we'll be investing 30 billion rands in capital investment and in infrastructure in the city of Johannesburg, driving our vision, and I'll talk about that a bit later, but also investing in ensuring that we're able to replenish aging infrastructure, looking at 2 critical areas: the major arteries and roads that are linking the city of Joburg, but also looking at the strategic nodes in the city of Johannesburg and ensuring that we're able to improve the quality of infrastructure that we provide in those nodes as the city of Joburg. And this is just an indicator of where the investments would be going in the city of Johannesburg. And I won't go into a bit of detail. I want to get to the point where we talk about the vision. And the same applies to where the investments would be going in relation to roads. So for purposes of orientation, the ring road there would be able to indicate where, in fact, we would be. Is there a light here? It's written danger, which might be a bit dangerous. But for those who understand Johannesburg, where there are many green dots there would be the CBD, and then going north would be along the M1, and you'd see the ring road, which is the N1. That's really an indicator of, in fact, the road system, and therefore you can plot yourself in terms of those locations in the city of Joburg. And this is in terms of investing in the bus rapid transit system. We've invested in the 2 in phase 1A, phase 1B, and we're projecting to invest in phase 1C that essentially is driving the bus rapid transit system of Johannesburg and where investments are going. And this is how it would look in the future, where the bus rapid transit. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. So this would essentially be the sort of public infrastructure investments that we'd be making in ensuring that the city works better, and where the bus rapid transit system would be supporting the sort of direction that we're taking as the city of Joburg. But that's responding to the current reality. we're responding to the current reality. So if you ask the question, well, would you be able to invest in infrastructure to ensure that the economy runs? Certainly. Well, would you be able to ensure that you improve the quality of services through recapitalization of infrastructure? Certainly. Well, would you ensure that there is enough public transport to ensure the mobility of people? Certainly. Well, would we be able to ensure that you're able to address the bridges and recapitalization of the M1 double-decker? Certainly. But we're responding to the current reality. We have to think about our cities differently. And it's important that we think about our cities differently because our current reality, in fact, we should not be prisoners of our current reality, and most important, prisoners of our past. We must redefine our cities, and that is what the vision of the city of Johannesburg is. But let me briefly talk about, when we talk in South Africa, we talk about the problems of inequality, poverty, and hunger, unemployment. Inequality, poverty, and unemployment. I'm sure we repeat it all the times. You hear many politicians saying inequality, poverty, and unemployment, the triple challenges in South Africa. But let's talk about them in the context of Johannesburg and what they mean. And what they mean, in fact, to the stakeholders here today. Because when we put in place a vision for the city of Johannesburg and develop programs for the implementation of that vision, we've had to respond to these critical issues that require of us to think transformation in Joburg. Now let's talk about spatial inequality, where in fact, on the basis of location, you are unable to access the urban amenity because of location, and therefore your ability to interface with the urban amenity is impacted on by location. And I'll talk about that briefly in a slide I'll show right now. You also talk of a country that is defined as the most unequal society in the world in terms of the Gini coefficient. That is a serious problem. We can't continue saying we're the most unequal and not do something about it. There's a problem. But the Gini coefficient tells us part of the story. There are interesting results that we've got from Census 2011, and they say, in fact, if you look at the reality of Gini coefficient and you look at it in relation to income per population group in South Africa, we have a serious problem. If you look at income of Africans, average income of Africans in Johannesburg, it is estimated to be about 36,000 rands per annum. A slight increase for those who are from the colored population group and from the Indian population group, a further slight increase. But in fact, from the white population group, the disparity is so significant that we're talking about an average of 172,000 rands per annum, average income. Now, if you live in an unequal society that has had problems of racial discrimination, and you do not factor that in terms of your policy interventions, you are but just dreaming that you'll be able to solve the problems of the country. We must create a country, at least for us in the city of Johannesburg, it is critical that we create a city where there is prosperity for all and that all can climb the ladder of prosperity. And that not only should our policy interventions enable you to access prosperity, they should enable you to continuously climb the ladder of prosperity, because in fact, if we keep the situation as it is currently, we are captives of our past and we need to build a different future. But we also live in cities where there is poverty. In Johannesburg, it is estimated that there are more than 4.4 million people. Of that 4.4 million people, 22% are poor. Of those who are poor, 42% in fact are food insecure, meaning that they go without a meal for at least 3 days in a month. people that go without a meal in Johannesburg. Now, why is this important to a discussion on property and investments and therefore the vision of the city of Joburg? It is important because, in fact, if we do an assessment of what people spend their money on, the poorest of the poor spend their money on food and transport. So for us to be able to deal with poverty, we can't go and look for it somewhere else. We must deal with it in terms of mobility and in terms of food. And therefore, our interventions should enable us to do that. And that's why when we talk about spatial inequality and how it manifests in our city, we should be able to say, let's create investment opportunities, not just where the market thinks it is responding to our current reality, but where the market should begin to think about what our future is and whether, in fact, we do think about creating prosperity for all. And allow me to argue that, in fact, suggesting that that is only government's responsibility is not just inappropriate, it's a huge cop-out. Because, in fact, as a society, we can't say that for those who own the means of creation, please just sit there and let government sort out the rest of the socio-economic problems that we have as a society. We must build a partnership between business and government that enables us to deal with the problems. For when the people march and we talk about service delivery protests, truth is those people are hungry, poor, unemployed, do not have access to adequate education, and all sorts of problems. If we do not build this partnership, we're in fact leading ourselves down a garden path. We are getting ourselves into trouble. Allow me to say, think about Marikana in a slightly different way. Think about Marikana, in fact, that it wasn't a conflict between government and the trade unions. Think about Marikana in the context that, in fact, it was workers who said, we want to dump the NUM. I'm putting it literally. We want to dump the NUM because they are in alliance with the ruling party. We want to join another union that's going to enable us to confront, not government, but the mine owner. They were not fighting government. For whatever we are engaged in, it is not government that those people were fighting. They were not demanding their salaries from government. In fact, they were saying, we don't want this trade union because it's too cozy with business and government. So, we must deal with our reality within a different context and say, if we talk past each other, we're unlikely to deal with the problem for what it means, because in fact, sometimes the anger that is directed is not always directed at government, but it is anger of people who are hungry, who are poor, who are unemployed, who require access to their cities and the opportunities they create, and we must create those opportunities. And therefore, the vision that we've developed. But before getting to the vision, and I have to get myself slightly more disciplined in terms of time, let's talk about, we call this the deprivation map. So if you look on what we call the indicators, the 5 indicators, they indicate how we look at deprivation and the most deprived areas. And if you look at that in relation to density, because the table there from green to red is indicating density, there is a direct correlation to higher densities to high income deprivation. So that's the reality of space, location, and property investment in the city of Johannesburg. So where you have the red is where you have the higher densities, and this is just an indicator of the densities that you have. So the highest concentration of people is in the areas that are poorest in the city of Johannesburg. That's our current reality. We are saying as a city, we cannot continue to be captive to our current reality. We must confront this. To confront this, we're building our policy interventions around transit-oriented developments, because as I said, if people are spending their money on transportation, then in fact we need to enable them to access the city in a more efficient way and to build our city along these corridors that we talk about. And the BRT is critical, but parallel to the BRT would be the rail system that we have. We've identified 6 corridors, the 6th corridor, because it's not primarily a road-based corridor, is in the south. It's a rail-based corridor, but these corridors we call the corridors of freedom. And why do we call them the corridors of freedom in Johannesburg? And maybe, how much time do I have, Richard? I've run out of time. Well, you'll be a bit gentle with me. I'm the younger mayor.
Yes, how much time would you like, Mr. Mayor? Should we say another 7 minutes?
Somewhere.
Excellent, excellent. In your own time, Mr. Mayor.
Let's talk about the morphology of Johannesburg. What in fact spatially we have inherited that we need to change in Johannesburg. And we explain it in a very simple way. If you go to Johannesburg, where we are located, which is in Braamfontein, is the Ridge. On the north of the Ridge is the northern suburbs. It's Parktown. That's where the owners of the mines put themselves, and they would put the Ridge, which is where the city headquarters is. South of the Ridge is the CBD, which is where the trading happened. South of the CBD is the mining reef, the result of which is an artificially created ridge, which is the mine dumps. And south of the mine dumps is the historically black townships of River Lille, Soweto, Lenasia, El Dorado Park, etc. Not only were the architects of apartheid so brilliant that they separated us in terms of racial groups, they said, in fact, we're building these townships south of the mine dumps because, amongst others, the wind blows primarily in Johannesburg, southwest. So, in fact, these people must be able to get the mine dust blowing southwest from the mine dumps. It is still part of our current reality. If we are to build a city, we need to build a different city, and therefore the corridors of freedom, because we are saying we can't continue with the current spatial logic that is there. We need a different spatial logic that says, how do you knit this together? How do you use the mining belt as a resource to knit the city together? How do you ensure that you look at the corridors and say, we will knit our city together because, in fact, we're not captive of our current reality, but accept that, in fact, we're trying to build a society that is truly non-racial, non-sexist, prosperous, and democratic, but that can't just be in terms of how we talk about it. It must be in terms of where we invest our money, where we create opportunities for investment, how you use land use policy, infrastructure investments to drive a city that is being knit together. Allow me to say that we're as ambitious as to say in the city of Johannesburg that we've put the policies in place to reverse apartheid. We're not just going to talk about it. We're not just going to say, you know, there was apartheid in South Africa, now it is gone. Let me tell you, apartheid is still there. Not in terms of policy, but in terms of the spatial reality of our city. The location, the concentration of poverty in the historically black townships, the income disparities. If we are to resolve our problems, we must confront it. And we've taken a view as the city of Johannesburg that we have to move beyond our responsibilities to provide services. We have a responsibility to transform society, and that is what we're about. We're not just about ensuring that you get this, that, and that. It's not a transactional relationship between us and the people of Johannesburg. It is a relationship about building a fundamentally different society from the society we've inherited. And that is our vision as the city of Johannesburg. Now, this is just briefly indicating where the corridors are located, and because I don't have much time, I'll just indicate two of the corridors and what we're trying to do. And these slides are indicating how, not just when you look at our spatial development frameworks going forward, the land use rights that would be allocating would be responding to these corridors. The infrastructure investments that we're making, the 30 billion I spoke about, is not just dealing with the issues of the now, but it is about concentrating investments along these corridors that change the city. Now, this is about looking at what we call the Empire-Perth corridor and saying in decade zero, this is our current reality. Our projection is that in decade one, which is by 2020, this should be our reality in terms of these corridors. And you'd see the densities, and that's where our capital investments are going, and our land use policies would be saying, you can't develop here because, in fact, we will be able to grant you the rights. In decade two, this should be our reality. And in decade three, this should be our reality. This is the reality of stitching Johannesburg back together. The second corridor that's also receiving attention is what is the Louis Potter corridor. And same logic, this is decade zero, decade one, decade two, and decade three. So progressively, you'd be able to see that this is how the city is going to be stitched together, and this is what our land use policies are going to be, and therefore, as an investor and a developer, this is where, in fact, the city is going. So if you find that, in fact, we are no longer biased to only the areas where you were biased to, please understand what we're trying to do. We are trying to build a different city. So no, we are not completely in agreement that the only decision about location is location. We think that there's a different reality, that in fact you make investment decisions also because you accept your responsibility to build this country and to build the city of Johannesburg, not a. And we know that we'd have to have conversations with yourselves about, well, how do we make this work? The last few slides are just an indicator of where, in fact, there's a disjuncture. Where, in fact, if you look at Alexandra and the developments in Alex, how government investments have not always been matched in terms of how the market instruments are responding, and therefore how we continue to entrench disparities because we don't have the instruments that look at these areas in terms of their market potential and opportunities that are there. Now, in Alex, this slide is just indicating a new development in Alex, the RDP housing developments that have taken place, and how densities have increased in Alexandra. And those densities are just an indicator of where people are. When people come to Johannesburg, they seek location, and they find there you get houses. 300,000 people in the city of Johannesburg live in backyard shacks. But what are backyard shacks? It's actually a market, because a market is about a transaction between two parties where people say there's a buyer and a seller and they agree on a price. Now there's a market, it's called backyard shacks. It's a form of, you said we shouldn't say tenants, customer. Now, how come the market has not always responded to this? In fact, if you look at it as a market, your income per square meter in Alexandra is actually more than in Sandton. Income per square meter, but we've never looked at it as a market. So we've never said, where is the market at the bottom of the pyramid, as Prahlad said. So where is that market? And we're saying maybe the market instruments are not always responsive to where government investment is going, but also to the new reality. But we're also talking about, along these corridors, that we have inclusive economic development. And I'm going to make the last statement, take you to the last slide, say thank you, in the interest of time. We visited Rosebank about a month ago, we spoke to property owners, property developers. We spoke about the current reality of Rosebank, what the issues are, but we had a conversation about, in fact, the sort of ratios that we use. You know, you'd have parking ratios per square meter of office space, you should have so much parking. We determined, in fact, because this is a conversation we had with the property owners now, there. We've probably created less than 500 square meters for taxi ranks in Rosebank, which is the dominant mode of transportation to Rosebank for the workers in the offices of the people that are in Rosebank. But if you were to calculate the number of parking bays for the private car, saying disproportionate is a huge understatement. Now, it means that our policy instruments have not always been adequate because we did not provide for a ratio for taxis so that when you make your investment, you don't just respond to the needs of the one in their car. You make your investment also responding to the needs of your workers that come through the minibus taxi. So we need to change our planning policies together with yourselves so that it allows you to make provision. It might be on our piece of land, or it might be shared, but we must change the policies, and that's where we're going. That's why this opportunity to have this discussion was important. To say, as the city of Joburg, we're saying, but the ratios are wrong. If this is the ratio per square meter for office space to parking, let's have the same ratio for taxi ranks, so that you're able to respond to the needs of those who come to your offices. If this is your shopping center, and in fact you have hawkers that sell along your shopping center, shouldn't you have smaller shop fronts that enable those people to trade in a more organized space? So our instruments, in fact, have been stuck in the past. Our policies have been stuck in the past, and therefore we all talk about the things that make us comfortable. Floor area ratio, this parking ratio to this. We've all inherited it. Let us write a different reality. And that is where the city of Johannesburg is going. So please, when we engage, Neil will be asking for a conversation with yourself and your members. It is not about building hostility between us and you. It is about saying, let's build a different relationship. For this relationship should enable us to build the city of the future. As I said, this brings me to
Must have finished. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Mayor, come on up. Have a seat.